suppose there's a distinction between whether you're thinking about dietary changes as something additional to disease-modifying treatment or instead of.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're thinking of them as something additional? Is that how you're viewing it?
Definitely.
I mean, I think what we can say about the pharmaceutical drugs is we know that they work, whereas obviously for some of the what we call like the nutraceutical approach, we don't know definitively.
What was that word?
Nutraceutical, yeah.
Oh, that's a new word.
I guess it's a little science thing.
Ooh, I just got myself back in my ear again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I think we're having a lot of interference.
Yeah, are you getting any interference, Mel?
No, but you did just cut out for a couple of minutes.
All right, cutting out again a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Is there anybody else on the call?
Are there others waiting for questions?
They're dropping in and out, but...
Yeah, you get your nutraceuticals from, the health food shop now.
I see.
One of the problems, of course, is whether it's actually based on, a science. And I think some of the nutraceuticals do actually work on a real biology. But what we've got to do is in many cases the doses where you can show a biological effect scientifically is a much greater dose than is in the food product. So you have lots of claims about red wine or blueberries or grapefruit juice doing certain things, but at the end of the day we want scientific proof.
Yeah, I think, and the problem is diet's such a terrible thing to try and do in a trial.
Okay.
It also seems to be based on a person's, is it called a microbiome?
Yeah.
So what works for some person might not work for others, and therefore it becomes quite hard to prove anything.
Right. Have we been told that we need to do the introduction again?
So we need to do the introduction again. I guess there's a big delay, so I guess we're hearing what we said probably about 10 minutes ago. Well, really not that much, but for any new viewers, welcome, and in whatever language you want to say, Dobar dan, hola, welcome. This is a live broadcast. It's a live stream from ACTRIMS and ECTRIMS 2014. On my left we have Amy Bowen from the MS Trust, and on my right we have Sharma Lee, who's a consultant neurologist. So if you have got any questions, there are ways to do it. You can sort of send them to an email to barts at bartsms@gmail.com, or preferably just send us a tweet at #MSQT, and if we get a tweet, and we'll hopefully be able to answer your questions. I'm sorry we're having technical difficulty. We did try it yesterday and it was working, but obviously when you get on the real thing, teething issues occur, and I'm sorry that's beyond our control. We'll have to smack the wrists of people at ACTRIMS for doing that. Okay.
So one of the topics we had discussed about was the treatment paradigms which you would use. I think with the armamentarium of drugs which are now coming onto the market for treatment of MS, in particular of relapsing remitting MS, we need to consider whether we practice escalation therapy or induction therapy, and that's out there for the audience to think. What treatment would you like from the beginning? Would you like to go through the first-line DMTs, which have moderate efficacy but very good side effect profile, and then escalate through the different levels to achieve increasing efficacy but play it off with the increased side effects, and maybe possibly end up at the experimental therapies which are currently in research? Or do you go for a very highly active treatment very early on and have a disease-free period which lasts for about 3 to 5 years, and then redose if you want to, or step down after the induction therapy onto the first-line DMTs as a maintenance.
So to just so that those of us who aren't practicing clinicians really understand the difference between induction and escalation. Does induction just mean going in early and hard with treatment? Is that basically what it means?
Effectively, you in any way you think, you're picking the domestos, so the domestos antibiotic, the domestos of any treatment available, and you give it very early on.
Right.
Why that is because you already, when you're diagnosed, you are late in the starting of MS. You're late probably by 10 to 11 years, and if you then go in there much sooner, you may then be able to impact for much further in a person's life. So I think these are therapies which really do need to be thought about, and if you have the option, then maybe we need to think about how we would actually practice that in real life clinical time.
Yeah, I mean that certainly came through in the session that I saw this morning. Is there was clearly some differences in how people thought about how aggressive to treat right from the beginning, even when somebody has a first episode. You know, do you treat clinically isolated syndrome where you've had one event but you don't know yet whether that's really definitely going to develop into clinically definite MS or not, and there were different attitudes amongst the prescribers in the room. I suppose that's inevitable to a certain degree, but for somebody who's making choices about their own disease, their own condition, I think it's interesting to think you might get a slightly different answer from a different neurologist.
Well, I think this is where it's interesting being in an environment like this, because this is where there isn't necessarily globalization in terms of how we do treatment. So in the UK, they tend not to be treating at this early first episode, yet you'll see some presentations this in the next few days. In fact, there's one on Saturday which we won't talk about, which was looking at beta interferon and looking 11 years later. That's 11, and it showed that there is benefit. So if you're actually treating at this early stage, 11 years later, it looks like there was benefit from having beta interferon. So this is a big argument that needs, will be addressed: is how early do we start treating, and how aggressively. I don't know if you have any feelings on this, Shamali.
I think it's very patient-led, how you decide which approach you're going to take with a patient. There is a period from diagnosis which is about acceptance about the diagnosis, as well as how a patient copes with it, as well as how they decide to manage the condition, and it's dependent also on how much research the person does. So based on that, you then have to tailor how you would tailor their treatment. So it's very patient-directed.
Well, is that always the truth when the governments decide, in some cases in the UK, that they can't afford the drugs, so it's not always a patient choice?
Well, there is a slight forceful lottery as far as that is concerned, but often I think we have the help of the societies to lobby and patient groups to lobby for us in getting treatments which patients should be on into NHS and also into clinical practice. I mean, this is an issue pertinent to the UK, but probably not to Australia and US, where it's more directed by the insurance companies. So that the issues there are completely different here, which is whether you should, how would you respond to treatment after the relapsing remitting starts to progress? I think if there are things which start to come through for the progressive phase, then you may actually want to use that. Now, the trials in progressive MS, which are due to report next year, would that then change our management? Would we be putting all of our progressive patients onto these drugs if there is a positive effect. And I'd like to think that we can, but obviously that would be at a substantial cost to the health system as well.
Then that's quite interesting that you mentioned that. Again, on Saturday, there's a presentation talking about the risk-sharing scheme, which for those of you outside the UK, you're probably thinking, what is it? Well, it was kind of a way that the UK government allowed access to what they considered expensive drugs, which they didn't feel were cost-effective. And so this risk-sharing scheme was set up. And we'll be seeing a report on Saturday looking at the 6 years on, and what they're suggesting is, in fact, people who were on active drug did indeed show benefits. So, that's a good thing. Whether it was the level of benefit that the government had hoped for, it's about £36,000 per QALY, which is a quality of life assessment, which is about $60,000. But nevertheless, it did show that there was benefit, and I guess so it was worth it. Worth it for fighting to get the access to these new drugs. And I guess as these new drugs, that some of them that we'll hear about in the next couple of days come along, that we'll have to have the fight again to ensure that people with MS do get the drugs, because what is very clear is that the cost of these drugs are not going down, that they're going up. But the other interesting thing, again, at the meeting, there are some drugs are coming out of their patent life, and it's quite evident from this meeting that there are new kids coming on the block who are obviously producing these new drugs, these generic type drugs, which will compete against some of the existing drugs, and hopefully they'll start to maybe bring the price down. But obviously this is economics and not medicine, so we don't have the control of the purse strings, and we don't really have the control of the pharmaceutical industry, so we'll have to wait and see.
So we can see the number of viewers going up. Does anybody have any questions out there for that they wanted to ask? The numbers have gone up just while we've been talking over the last little while.
So the drug you're talking about is daclizumab.
Daclizumab is a new one.
Would you like to tell us about daclizumab?
Well, daclizumab is a new drug. In fact, the drug I was talking about wasn't actually daclizumab. It was some new variants of Copaxone. So Teva, who manufacture Copaxone, which is a mix of amino acids that look like myelin basic protein, well, its initial patents are coming out of life, and so there are a number of new companies that are making, what they call biosimilars or Me Too's that will look like Copaxone, and there are data showing that they work as equally effective as Copaxone. So that starts to show there's competition. At the same time, we'll also have some new information about a new variant of Copaxone from Teva, which you don't have to inject as many times. And as Shamali mentioned, there's also this thing called the Clusimab. I can't remember what its new name is. It's christened in this meeting, and it's an antibody that blocks the receptor that is a cytokine, a protein that stimulates T cells to grow. And this antibody it's an infusion, can block that, and it's thought that, well, it's been shown or will be shown that it's quite effective at blocking relapsing MS. It's another one to start add to the equation. We'll have to see how it goes. The data is going to be presented, I think, on Friday morning, so we look forward to that.
Interesting. I mean, I suppose we should be thinking in terms of management of the immune system, really. Are we talking about B-cell therapies? Are we talking about T-cell blocking therapies? Maybe this is the time where next year might bring in ideas about targeting different pathways rather than simply just reducing the pathways as a whole. I don't believe we know fully what the interferons do or what Copaxone actually achieves, but with these targeted monoclonals, we may be able to say, oh, actually, we're targeting B-cell function here.
Mm.
So you're saying the newer treatments, you're much clearer about exactly what the mechanism of action is than
To a certain extent.
to a certain degree than some of the ones that have been around a little bit longer. Is that true for all of them?
Well, I think we still don't really know how Copaxone works. We still really don't know how beta interferon works. I think with natalizumab, we're pretty certain of what the mechanism is, and likewise with Gilenya, we're pretty certain of the mechanism that is effective in relapsing MS. Now, again, this is something that will come out maybe on Saturday, is that there are potential other mechanisms that these drugs can do, and there's a suggestion that drugs that target what Gilenya does will stimulate myelin production. So it could be that these drugs actually affect myelination, so they could affect repair. And we don't know the answer to that, and it's all experimental. But as Gilenya is in trial, and the results will be known probably at the end of this year, so one would suspect will be presented in ACTRIMS 2015. But there is also some other molecules that target the same pathway that are used in secondary progressive MS. So again, those studies are ongoing, and again, what we find at the meeting, there's a number of other competitors coming into the situation to try and take on Novartis and their what they call a sphingosine 1-phosphate modulator. So there'll be a number of potential new drugs coming along that will target the same thing. A bit like you had with the beta interferons, you had essentially 3 different versions of the same type of compound. We'll see differences with these new drugs, and some of them will have different side effects and different efficacies. So on the whole, I suspect they'll all work, but it's how well they're tolerated is one of the keys.
Just to give people a feel for, because this is the side of the conference that I don't really know, for the scientists rather than the clinicians, will there be a big community of scientists like yourself here? I mean, what's the balance between clinicians and scientists at an event like this?
The event here is very, very clinically dominated, and I guess the function of this meeting is really about educating neurologists, not necessarily MS specialists who probably are much more aware of what's going on, but the neurologists who may not be an MS specialist. They come to these meetings, and then that's where they get the real information up to date of how they should be treating multiple sclerosis. So it's not just MS neurologists on the same sort of old jolly type thing. It's a real education for the practicing neurologists as a whole, and that's really what this main function of this meeting is. Now, obviously, it is the major multiple sclerosis meeting in the world, so this will attract a lot of people, and scientists will be here, and there are a number of science presentations, because really the science is the clinical of tomorrow. But there are lots of other little meetings that many of the scientists will go to, not perhaps quite as lavish as this one, but they're occurring all the time. Scientists talk, they love to talk, and these type of meetings allow people to talk and get ideas, which really are the treatments of tomorrow.
It's hard to give people a sense of the scale of this event. It's massive. It's really, really huge. I think because it's the American and the European event together.
And the South American.
And the South American. There's just a number of people here. And, I mean, I think it is very exciting that there's so much energy and attention being focused on MS. And the thought that there's a lot of general neurologists who don't do MS all the time who are here and getting access to that kind of learning. So that session I was in this morning, where people are really thinking through what the logic is, what the kind of clinical processes, thought processes they're going through when they're prescribing are really important, and to be able to get feedback from MS specialists on that is got to be hugely valuable.
Yeah, that's what the sessions this morning were really all about. It was about people who are MS specialists really imparting their knowledge to the next wave of MS specialists. Does that make sense?
I think for the researchers in particular, the attendance of the posters is very important.
Yeah.
So that opens around lunchtime today, which is probably open now.
How many are there?
There's something about like 1,000 presentations. I kind of spent a few hours reading through them, but we only got the abstracts and the content this morning. So that's if I'm a bit dodgy about what is the actual content, it's because I guess it's hot off the press. My fingers are still burning, and hopefully we can kind of digest it a bit more in the next sort of day or two, and then we can impart the knowledge that we're gaining.
I mean, looking at the poster categories today and tomorrow, there are sections for neuroprotection and repair, neuropathology, genetics, disease therapy. So all of these important things are covered here, but there are thousands of posters here.
Yeah. So the main big sessions are the what we can do the here and now, which is really the DMTs, and the poster sessions are
and the symptomatic treatments as well.
And the symptomatic treatments. Sorry. And the poster sessions are really kind of giving us a flavour of what's going on. So some of them the studies are already ongoing, and the posters are kind of telling us what's going to happen, and so it does give you some encouragement that things are happening. So if we went back a few years, we wouldn't be talking about trials ongoing in repair, yet there are studies ongoing, there are it's not quick enough, and that's the problem with the pace of MS. It's a slowly evolving disease, and therefore the results don't materialize quicker, and that's an unfortunate thing.
So I'm actually attending a couple of the young investigator sessions, which are highlighted also as the stem cell work, which is something I'll be updating on tomorrow. And in fact, looking at that, there is the mesenchymal stem cell progenitor phase 1 results, which should be interesting to find out what that is about, because this was previously reported on a similar thing. So let's get some updates on that. So all of this will be coming through tomorrow's fees.
Yeah.
Well, I just, from this morning, one of the things that really did stand out is the difference in access and availability of different treatments, not just disease-modifying treatments, but symptomatic treatments as well. People were talking about managing spasticity, and there was a neurologist from Spain talking about access to, using Sativex, and we're just in a situation in the UK where it's not looking so promising for access to Sativex in certainly in England. The situation is better in Wales, and I just think it raises a lot of really interesting questions about the divergence in how people will, how clinicians will be approaching treatment if they have different options available to them. And hearing that the contrasting experience of the prescribers in terms of what they have to offer people, particularly people with symptomatic problems who need access to really a wide range of different treatments to manage all the different symptoms. There does seem to be, it just strikes me from the first morning, there does seem to be quite an equal focus on not just people with relapsing remitting MS, but also people whose disease is perhaps further down the line, or they've got more symptoms to deal with, or they have progressive disease. I just think the profile of that has gone up a lot over the last few years, and I think that's really important and encouraging. I think that there's a research energy behind progressive disease and symptomatic treatments.
And I think it also speaks to the success of the DMTs, because we're starting to have an impact on the relapsing disease. It allows the companies and people to actually shift their focus to progression, repair, because once you can stem what's driving the disease to stop the relapses, then you can think about actually repairing the problem. So we have got a tweet. So I can't read it. So.
Let me read it. It's from Laura.
Yeah, Laura.
Laura. Hi, Laura. So she's tweeted saying treatment has become a matter of economics and not medicine. Well, yes, I can't disagree with that tweet. I think we're always trying to avoid doing that. From a clinician perspective, I would say I definitely try to think of that as second thing in my mind. And you might say, well, that's a bit counterproductive, and doctors often do that kind of thing where they jump before they think. But in terms of what we are taught to do, which is practice medicine, that's what we do as number one. Majority of us do not work in the private health sector in the UK, so we're not aware of that as a first one. I agree that in the US and Australia that may be an issue. You do think about it because it's more in your face, but we're kind of protected from that in the UK in a way.
But I mean, when we talk about the cost of drugs, I think in the UK there may be more of a spread from the cheapest to the most expensive, but actually when you look at the cost to people in the US, for example, the spread isn't really as big from the cheaper end to the more expensive end. So unfortunately in the US they just pay a lot more money than the rest of the world, and maybe that's something that needs to be addressed. Again, if you don't pay it, then the pharmaceutical companies will have the problem. But this is one advantage of obviously having socialized medicine, is that when you've got a consumer, you have very big bargaining power to try and push the costs of drugs down, and that's one of the advantages certainly we have in the UK, where we have a central purchaser who will drive a very hard bargain. So that's useful for us. So just for you, it's our hours is nearly up, and unfortunately, we've had technical problems. But just to say that we will be trying again, because obviously that's like part of science. So we will be having another live stream, and this afternoon we've got a thing called the burning debates. Now these are at 3 p.m. in Eastern Daylight Time. That's in Boston. It's 8 o'clock in the evening, British summertime, or 9 o'clock if you're in continental Europe. And these are debates between essentially two neurologists, which will be bashing it out on something of importance. So today we've got Volker Knapertz from Teva, who will argue that the only way is pharma. So only pharma can develop MS drugs, and on the other side of the equation we'll have Bibi Bilakova from the USA, who will be telling that actually academics can really push things forward and get drugs to you. So please log on to the debate. It's a live thing. It's got a live Twitter stream. The hashtag is burning debate, not debates, but debate. And you will be able to vote to see who wins. So it'll be good to see that. And we've got a few more. We've got one on stem cells tomorrow, and then we'll have a third one on Friday, which is early and aggressive is better than softly. So let's look forward to that. Sign up, be there, and we hope things will work better this afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.